A scream rips through the void. A six-limbed shadow beast with razor teeth devours the light. Do you believe in alien monsters? Do you believe a human can tame one? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. To begin this thrilling and emotional journey, smash that like button, comment Predator below, and subscribe right now. Are you ready to uncover this terrifying secret? The Galactic Unified Forces, or GUF as it was less formally and more accurately groaned across three spiral arms of the Milky Way, was a testament to the universe's capacity for both breathtaking innovation and mind-numbing bureaucracy. Their starships warped space-time with the casual indifference of a toddler bending a juice box straw. Their weaponry could rearrange planetary geology on a whim, and their medical advancements had relegated death to the realm of elective surgery for the truly adventurous. Yet, this same organization remained perpetually stumped by the complexities of brewing a decent caffeinated beverage and designing an official form that didn't require the life history and biometric data of your third cousin twice removed. It was into this glorious mess that one Tess Blackwood, late of Tacoma, Washington, Earth, found herself rather unceremoniously dumped. Earth's entry into galactic society had been less a grand diplomatic affair and more a stumbling, slightly intoxicated gatecrasher at a party already in full swing. Commander Var, a Nexalod with a disconcerting arrangement of 12 eyes that blinked with the synchronized apathy of faulty traffic lights, surveyed the latest batch of recruits. His carapaced exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh fluorescent hum of the processing center, a stark contrast to the soft, vulnerable flesh of the Terran specimen before him. And here, Var's voice rasped, each syllable clicking with a subtle disdain, "We have another soft-skinned primate from that backwater mudball." His gaze, or rather collective gazes, settled on Tess with an almost clinical disinterest. "Tell me, Earth creature," he continued, his mandibles twitching in a way Tess desperately hoped wasn't pre-lunch anticipation, "do you genuinely believe you possess the fortitude for training on Terminus 9? A ripple of what might have been alien amusement, a sound akin to a dial-up modem arguing with a strangled goose, rippled through the assembled recruits. Most species, Var elaborated, require several generations of rigorous genetic augmentation before they are even considered disposable enough for death worlds. Tess stood ramrod straight, a lifetime of ingrained military movie cliches kicking in. Her internal monologue, however, was a frantic scramble. Death world? Disposable? Was that a compliment? She swallowed, trying to ignore the unsettling clicks emanating from the commander's facial appendages. "Recruit R7293 reporting for duty, sir," she managed, her voice betraying a tremor she hoped was interpreted as steely resolve. Var's multiple eyes narrowed, or at least, Tess thought they did. It was hard to tell with that many of them operating independently. "Earth," he stated, the universal translator somehow imbuing the word with profound skepticism, "possesses multiple biomes classified as extreme by galactic standards, I am told." "Yes, sir," Tess replied. "I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. We have bears." This elicited another wave of that bizarre alien laughter. "Bears." The commander repeated the word, the universal translator somehow conveying a level of withering contempt that no human inflection could ever achieve. "How delightful," he drawled. "I am certain the scorched beasts of Terminus 9 will be utterly cowed by your experience with bears." The journey to Terminus 9 aboard a GUF transport vessel was a masterclass in ergonomic failure. The seating arrangements seemed specifically designed for beings with exoskeletons and a complete disregard for anything resembling a spine. Tess found herself wedged between a Valerian, whose 6 limbs all seemed to operate on independent and aggressively territorial principles of personal space, and a gelatinous Murap, a creature whose primary form of locomotion appeared to be accidental absorption of its immediate surroundings, including, much to Tess's chagrin, the lower hem of her ill-fitting uniform. "First human in your unit, huh?" The question came from across the cramped aisle. A reptilian Draxian was meticulously cleaning its scales with a sonic pick, the tiny vibrations creating an unsettling buzzing sound. "Bet you won't last a cycle." Tess offered a thin, strained smile. "Is that a professional assessment?" she retorted, "or just casual xenophobia?" The Draxian's forked tongue flicked out in what Tess cautiously interpreted as a chuckle. "Neither. It's statistics." Terminus 9 boasts a 97% attrition rate for species lacking natural armor or inherent venom glands. You possess, it paused, its vertical pupils narrowing with what seemed like genuine curiosity, skin that tears when you brush against a thorny plant. We also have something called stubborn spite, Tess shot back, a flicker of defiance igniting within her. It's kept our species alive through ice ages, plagues, and reality television. The Draxian tilted its head, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both confusion and a grudging respect. What is? Tella? Just then, the ship's artificial intelligence, a voice with the cheerful cadence of a tax auditor announcing an extended review, cut through the awkward silence. Attention, all recruits. We are commencing our descent to Terminus 9 training facility. Please ensure all appendages are securely attached to your torsos and all psychic barriers are at minimum strength. Atmospheric entry may cause mild discomfort, severe discomfort, or spontaneous molecular realignment in susceptible species. Tess gripped her harness, her knuckles white. The Murap beside her rippled with anxiety, its gelatinous form shifting to a queasy shade of chartreuse. Welcome to the next 3 years of your military career, the AI continued, its tone suggesting it had lost a significant bet to end up with this particular assignment. Try not to become part of the local food chain. Terminus 9 wasn't just a death world, it was the benchmark by which other death worlds measured their own inadequacy. The training facility, a cluster of aggressively fortified domes, had been erected in what was euphemistically termed the least lethal region of the planet, the equivalent of calling a particularly scorched patch of the sun the cool spot. The air itself hung thick with the stench of sulfur and something vaguely reminiscent of overripe bananas, a truly unsettling olfactory combination. The vegetation came in precisely 2 varieties, carnivorous and extremely carnivorous. Even the rocks seemed vaguely predatory, their crystalline structures absorbing light in ways that promised a migraine with prolonged eye contact. As Lieutenant Pyol, a gaseous being contained within a vaguely humanoid exoskeleton, droned on about the compound's amenities, you will eat here, train here, and possibly die here, though we do request you make it to the designated mortality processing centers if you feel death is imminent. Paperwork, you understand? Tess couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a colossal, possibly fatal, career decision. The collective groan that erupted from the non-human recruits upon hearing about the basic survival training in the Razor Leaf Forest the following day did little to alleviate her growing sense of impending doom. What's the Razor Leaf Forest? Tess whispered to the Draxian, who, despite their initial animosity, seemed to have become her reluctant source of terrifying local knowledge. It's where they separate the viable recruits from the future ration packs, the Draxian replied, its scales paling slightly. The trees secrete a neurotoxin that induces vivid hallucinations. The ground is riddled with burrowing parasites that enjoy laying eggs in your brainstem. And the entire area, its reptilian pupils contracted to pinpricks, is the primary hunting ground for the planet's apex predator, the Crixian Death Shadow. It leaned closer, its voice a low, chilling hiss. They say it can smell fear from 50 kilometers and its digestive acid can dissolve starship hull plating. Tess blinked. So, it's basically a space honey badger. The Draxian stared at her, its multifaceted eyes conveying utter bewilderment. I do not know what that is. But if it haunts the nightmares of your species, then yes. Precisely. The first day on Terminus 9 dawned in a peculiar, unsettling shade of purple-orange, casting long, distorted shadows across the alien landscape. As Tess stood at the edge of the Razor Leaf Forest, the grotesque vegetation looking like the unholy offspring of a cactus and a meat grinder, a single thought echoed in her mind. Well, at least the paperwork can't be this bad. The Razor Leaf Forest lived up to its ominous moniker. Towering, spindly trees with serrated leaves that swayed with a silent menace, even in the stagnant, sulphurous air, created a claustrophobic canopy. The ground beneath their boots was unnervingly spongy, occasionally pulsing with a faint, internal rhythm that sent shivers of primal unease down Tessa's spine. Each step was a gamble, a silent prayer that her standard-issue boots were impervious to whatever horrors lurked beneath the alien soil. We're being watched, Kazitz hissed, its forked tongue flicking out to taste the air, barely 20 minutes into their trek. Something big. Its reptilian eyes, now narrowed to predatory slits, scanned the dense foliage. It's circling us. Shimmer, the crystalline being, pulsed with an agitated light, its internal luminescence dimming and flickering like a faulty emergency beacon. Death shadow proximity. Retreat suggested. Probability of survival, statistically insignificant. Its translated light pulses conveyed a profound sense of existential dread. We need that beacon, Tess reminded them, her voice a strained whisper. The prickly sensation on the back of her neck, a vestige of millennia spent evading predators on Earth, was screaming at full volume. Her pulse rifle, designed for beings with far more flexible and numerous joints, felt cumbersome and inadequate in her sweaty grip. Great! Just great! Stranded in alien hell with discount laser tag equipment. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth, a sound like 1,000 razor-sharp leaves being dragged across each other, made all three of them freeze. Something was moving parallel to their path, something large enough to displace the vicious vegetation without so much as a whimper of resistance. Tessa's mind flashed back to old nature documentaries, the hushed narration describing apex predators with an almost reverent tone. This was no hushed narration. This was the prelude to becoming a statistic. There, Kazitz hissed, a clawed hand pointing towards a dense thicket of razor leaves. Tess turned, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. A patch of deeper darkness detached itself from the shadows beneath a gnarled, alien tree thing. Her first impression was of smooth, obsidian scales that seemed to swallow the very light, covering a body roughly the size of a terrestrial tiger but with a more sinuous, unsettling gait, like a cross between a panther and a Komodo dragon. Its head was an unnerving triangle, devoid of visible eyes, but lined with a series of sensory pits that pulsed with an eerie, internal blue glow, giving the impression of a living shadow with malevolent intent. 6 limbs moved with a fluid, predatory grace that spoke of lethal efficiency. Along its spine, what appeared to be retractable quills, each tipped with an unsettling sheen, lay flat against its back. "Don't move," Kazitz's voice was barely audible, a choked whisper of pure terror. The Death Shadow's triangular head swung towards them with a deliberate, predatory precision. Its nostrils, barely visible slits in its smooth hide, flared as it sampled the air, an invisible tendril of scent reaching out to them. The glowing blue sensory pits swept from Shimmer, whose crystalline form flickered erratically, to Kazitz, who stood frozen, scales paling visibly, and finally settled on Tess. For a long, heart-stopping moment, the creature fixated on the human. Tessa's mind raced, a chaotic jumble of survival instincts and half-remembered training simulations. Run? Hide? The drill instructor's dignified death speech wasn't exactly inspiring. Then, the impossible happened. The Death Shadow, the apex predator of this lethal world, the creature that could supposedly smell fear from 50 kilometers, simply sat down. It did what? Commander Ziegler's 12 eyes blinked in a staggered, asynchronous disbelief as Tess recounted the encounter in the sterile, brightly lit debriefing room. Kazitz and Shimmer, still visibly shaken, stood beside her, their silence a testament to the sheer absurdity of the event. "It sat, sir," Tess repeated, standing at rigid attention, the memory of those glowing blue pits still vivid in her mind. "Then it followed us. To the beacon and back to the compound perimeter. It's still out there, actually." Dr. Quinn, the base's chief xenobiologist, a spindly being whose numerous degrees seemed inversely proportional to their patience, peered at Tess through a set of magnifying lenses that made their eyes look like startled insectoids. "Impossible. Crixian death shadows are apex ambush predators. Documented kills from every species stationed on this planet. They do not sit. They certainly do not follow, unless it is a meticulously planned component of their hunting strategy. With respect, Doctor," Kazitz interjected, its voice still carrying a tremor, "this one did. It even prevented the human from stepping into a neurotoxin patch." The room erupted in a cacophony of multilingual exclamations of disbelief. Commander Ziegler raised several of his limbs for silence, a gesture that looked vaguely like a startled octopus. "Show me," he ordered, his voice betraying a sliver of the bewilderment that gripped them all. The security footage from the forest was grainy, the alien technology struggling to capture the nuances of the light-absorbing creature. Yet, it was clear enough to show the Death Shadow's bizarre behavior. After its initial encounter with the team, it had indeed followed them, maintaining a consistent distance of approximately 20 meters. At one point, when Tess, distracted by the hallucinatory shimmer of some innocuous-looking purple fungi, had nearly stumbled into a patch of neurotoxin-laced razor leaves, the creature had darted forward with blinding speed. Not to attack, but to deliberately block her path with its massive body. Fascinating, Dr. Quinn muttered, their mandibles twitching with scientific excitement. It's almost as if, but no, that would be utterly ridiculous. As if what? Commander Ziegler demanded, his patience wearing thin. Well, Dr. Quinn hesitated, their gaze fixed on the replay of the Death Shadow's inexplicable actions. Some predatory species have been known to adopt potential prey animals that trigger parental instincts instead of predatory ones. But that would require a significant degree of biochemical signaling compatibility, which is virtually impossible between species from vastly different evolutionary trees, let alone different planets. Tess shifted uncomfortably, a strange, unsettling thought forming in the back of her mind. Could it be? Could there be some echo of a shared, primal past buried deep within their alien biology? Humans had evolved alongside predators on Earth, a brutal dance of survival that had perhaps etched something fundamental into their very being. Dr. Quinn's numerous appendages fluttered dismissively. The chances of convergent biochemistry reaching a level where a Terminus 9 apex predator would recognize human pheromones as anything significant are, quite frankly, astronomical. Commander Ziegler steepled his primary manipulators, his multiple eyes fixed on the screen. And yet, he stated slowly, a hint of something akin to awe in his raspy voice, here we are. I want further observation. The human will continue training with enhanced monitoring. If this Death Shadow continues its unusual behavior, we may have stumbled upon something militarily significant. For Tess, the prospect of continuing her training with a six-limbed, obsidian killing machine that seemed to think she was its oddly fragile and perpetually lost offspring was less militarily significant and more existentially terrifying. As she was dismissed, the image of the Death Shadow sitting patiently in the purple-orange twilight outside the compound flashed in her mind. Well, she thought with a wry, internal grimace, at least I won't have to worry about walking home alone. The irony wasn't lost on Tess. She had survived the bureaucratic labyrinth of galactic recruitment only to become the prized specimen in an interspecies buddy cop movie no one asked for. Her training on Terminus 9 had morphed into a bizarre, high-stakes field trip, with Spot, the apex predator with a perplexing maternal instinct, as her ever-present, silent chaperone. The other recruits, initially wary, now regarded her with a mixture of morbid curiosity and grudging respect. Even Commander Ziegler's perpetually unimpressed gaze seemed to hold a flicker of something akin to bewilderment. Dr. Quinn's obsession intensified. Tess endured countless examinations, her body becoming a living, breathing data point in the xenobiologist's relentless pursuit of interspecies understanding. One particularly invasive procedure involved the extraction of a neural pathway sample, thankfully under heavy sedation, after which Quinn excitedly declared the bioelectrical signatures. They are almost endearingly primitive. Tess, groggy and with a lingering metallic taste in her mouth, could only manage a weak thumbs up. Primitive, my ass. Try navigating galactic bureaucracy on a dial-up connection. Despite the absurdity of her situation, a strange sense of camaraderie began to develop between Tess and Spot. It wasn't affection in the human sense, there were no shared jokes or comforting cuddles. Instead, it was a silent understanding forged in the crucible of a death world. Spot's unwavering protection, its swift and brutal efficiency against simulated threats, offered a primal reassurance that Tess hadn't realized she desperately needed. It was a stark contrast to the cold indifference of the GUF, where she was just another expendable recruit. This creature, this terrifying engine of evolution, saw something in her, a connection that defied logic and scientific explanation. It reminded her, in a twisted way, of the fierce loyalty her younger brother had shown her, shielding her from playground bullies with a ferocity that belied his small size. The memory brought a bittersweet pang, a reminder of the human connections that felt light years away. The simulated combat scenarios became less about Tess proving her worth and more about observing the lethal ballet of Spot in action. Its movements were poetry in motion, a blur of obsidian scales and razor-sharp quills. It dispatched holographic threats with a casual brutality that was both terrifying and strangely comforting. It was a stark reminder of the fundamental difference between the GUF's advanced technology and the raw, honed power of natural selection. War, Tess mused, often came down to this, not who had the fanciest weapons, but who possessed the most primal will to survive. And in that arena, Spot was a masterclass. One afternoon, during a particularly realistic simulation involving acid-spitting arachnoids, Tess found herself cornered. Before she could react, Spot launched itself into the fray, a whirlwind of teeth and claws. As the holographic arachnoids dissolved into shimmering pixels, Tess noticed a small, almost hesitant nudge against her leg. Spot had retrieved her drop-pulse rifle, its massive head tilted slightly, the eerie blue glow of its sensory pits fixed on her. It was an offering, a silent acknowledgement of their partnership. That night, staring up at the alien constellations through the barracks window, Tess allowed herself a small smile. The universe was a chaotic, often terrifying place, filled with creatures and technologies beyond human comprehension. Yet, here she was, a small, stubborn human, forging an unlikely bond with a creature that could tear her limb from limb without a second thought. It was absurd, it was dangerous, it was strangely empowering. War, she realized, often threw together the most unlikely of allies, bonds forged not in shared ideals but in the shared struggle for survival. And sometimes, the most terrifying creature could become your most steadfast companion. As she drifted off to sleep, the distant howls of Terminus 9's nocturnal predators echoing across the plains, a single, darkly humorous thought surfaced. Well, at least I finally have someone on this godforsaken planet who understands the importance of personal space. The piercing shriek of the base-wide alarm ripped through the third shift's uneasy quiet, a sound specifically engineered to induce maximum discomfort across a spectrum of sentient physiologies. For Tess, it was a visceral jolt back to the primal fear of the unknown, a stark contrast to the fragile sense of security she had begun to feel in Spot's silent presence. The explosions that followed were less abstract threat and more immediate, violent reality, shaking the very foundations of the reinforced barracks. Adrenaline surged, overriding the lingering fatigue from weeks of relentless training and Quinn's intrusive examinations. Tess scrambled for her sidearm, the weight of the unfamiliar weapon a small comfort in the face of such overwhelming chaos. Commander Ziegler's voice, amplified and distorted by the emergency comms, barked orders that were barely comprehensible amidst the cacophony of alarms and detonations. Defense Protocol Gamma 6, unknown hostiles, repel boarders. Gamma 6. Grab a weapon and try not to die. The GUF's emergency procedures were as efficient and inspiring as their form design. The barracks door buckled inward with a screech of stressed metal, followed by a blinding flash and a concussive wave that sent Tess sprawling. Through the dissipating smoke and the acrid smell of superheated metal, three figures emerged. Their environmental suits shimmered with advanced technology, far surpassing anything standard pirate groups would possess. The disruptor rifles they carried hummed with lethal energy, promising swift and brutal molecular disassembly. "This is a restricted military installation," Tess yelled, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in her hands. Standing in her mismatched uniform and adrenaline-fueled defiance, she must have looked utterly ridiculous. "Surrender your weapons immediately." The lead intruder's helmet tilted in what Tess interpreted as either amusement or a pre-programmed gesture of alien superiority. When he spoke, his voice was a synthesized monotone, devoid of emotion yet undeniably menacing. "We are not here for a fight, primate. We are here for research data. Specifically, Dr. Quinn's work on the Death Shadow behavioral anomaly. Corporate espionage. Of course. In a galaxy teeming with advanced civilizations, the most valuable commodity was often information, and the GUF, with its blend of cutting-edge science and bureaucratic ineptitude, was a prime target. The thought that lives were being risked for some corporation's bottom line ignited a spark of bitter anger within Tess. War, she was learning, wasn't always about grand galactic conflicts. Sometimes, it was about the petty greed of those who sought to weaponize the universe's wonders. "That information is classified," Tess retorted, clutching her sidearm tighter. "Hence the explosions, I presume?" "Precisely," the intruder replied with dry, synthesized sarcasm. "Now, You can either direct us to the xenobiology lab, or we can begin a more persuasive line of questioning. Starting with your less vital appendages. Before Tess could formulate a suitably withering reply, the wall to her right simply ceased to exist. One moment it was solid plasteel, the next it had been vaporized, leaving a gaping hole that framed the bizarre purple-orange light of Terminus 9's dawn and the sleek, deadly form of a very agitated Crixian death shadow. Spot moved with a liquid grace that belied its size, a nightmare given physical form. One moment it was a silhouette against the alien dawn, the next it had crossed the room in a blur of obsidian scales and lethal intent. Two of the intruders barely had time to register its presence before it struck with surgical precision, targeting limbs and weapons with brutal efficiency. It wasn't killing them, Tess realized with a surge of surprised relief, but systematically disabling them. The third intruder managed to bring his disruptor rifle to bear, the weapon's ominous hum filling the shattered barracks. But Spot was already in motion again, a living shadow that seemed to bend the very light around it. The retractable quills along its spine extended with a soft, shick-shick sound, like knives being unsheathed. It launched itself at the attacker, a terrifying projectile of muscle and razor-sharp edges. What followed was less a fight and more a demonstration of evolutionary perfection. Spot moved with impossible speed, evading the searing beam of the disruptor while simultaneously dismantling both the weapon and the intruder's advanced environmental suit. Within seconds, the would-be corporate spy was pinned beneath 600 pounds of apex predator, his suit in tatters, his face contorted in absolute terror visible through the shattered helmet. Spot turned its triangular head towards Tess, its sensory pits pulsing with that eerie blue glow. Then, in a gesture that would later be dissected and analyzed by xenobiologists across the galaxy, it nudged the discarded disruptor rifle towards her with one clawed limb. "Good boy," Tess said tentatively, a wave of bewildered gratitude washing over her. The creature made a sound somewhere between a rumbling purr and a garbage disposal unit processing silverware, a sound Tess was beginning to interpret as something akin to contentment. By the time the rest of the base security forces, a chaotic mix of bewildered aliens wielding an assortment of weaponry, had mobilized, Spot had already neutralized 4 more intruders who had breached the perimeter. More surprisingly, it seemed to be guiding, or rather herding, Tess towards the command center, its massive form a terrifyingly effective bodyguard. Commander Ziegler, visibly shaken but attempting to maintain a semblance of authority, stared at the unlikely duo as they entered the command center. "Recruiter 7293, he acknowledged, his normally imperious tone somewhat subdued by the presence of the apex predator lounging casually at Tess's side. "I see you've brought reinforcement." Spot helped fight off the attackers targeting the xenobiology data, Tess explained, trying to maintain military formality while absently patting the head of a creature that could disembowel everyone in the room faster than they could blink. Dr. Quinn burst into the command center, their numerous tentacles waving in unrestrained scientific ecstasy. "Extraordinary! The symbiotic bonding has progressed to active protection. This changes everything we know about interspecies compatibility." The attack was repelled within hours, largely thanks to Spot's unexpected intervention. The Death Shadow hadn't just protected Tess, it had somehow communicated with others of its kind. The remaining intruders found themselves in a terrifying predicament, hunted through the lethal landscape of Terminus 9 by creatures that had evolved to kill on this very world. In the aftermath, as GUF military intelligence interrogated the captured attackers, Tess found herself in an uncomfortable debriefing with high-ranking officials who had arrived via emergency transport. Admiral Yorix, a being composed primarily of sentient gas contained within an ornate mechanical exoskeleton, fixed their luminous gaze on Tess. "Let me get this straight," the Admiral's voice hissed through the vocoder. "A human recruit has somehow formed a bond with the deadliest predator on one of our most lethal training worlds. And this predator not only protects her but can apparently communicate with others of its species to coordinate defensive actions. All because—" Tess hesitated, the weight of the galaxy's bewildered gaze heavy upon her. "Well, sir," she began, a wry smile playing on her lips, "maybe it's because on Earth, we have a saying, the enemy of my enemy is a surprisingly effective, if somewhat slobbery, friend." The bureaucratic fallout from the pirate attack and the subsequent revelation of humanity's peculiar talent for befriending apex predators was significant. Tess found herself the reluctant center of attention, no longer just a statistically improbable survivor but a living, breathing paradigm shift in galactic military strategy. High-ranking officials, beings whose very forms defied terrestrial biology, descended upon Terminus 9 with a mixture of skepticism and avaricious curiosity. Admiral Yorix, the gaseous being in the ornate exoskeleton, regarded Tess with an almost palpable intellectual hunger. "You are suggesting," Recruit Blackwood, their voice a synthesized whisper that somehow conveyed immense authority, "that our millennia of strategic doctrine, our reliance on superior firepower and technological dominance, might be supplemented by the ability of your species to charm monsters?" Spot, who had become Tess's constant companion and a source of considerable anxiety for the base's security personnel, let out a low rumble that vibrated through the floor as Yorix uttered the word charm. Several nearby alien aides visibly flinched. "With respect, Admiral," Tess replied, trying to project an air of confidence she didn't entirely feel. "It's less about charm and more about a different kind of understanding. On Earth, we've coexisted with predators for millennia. We've learned their languages, their behaviors. Maybe that gives us an edge that other species, who've relied solely on technological superiority, haven't developed." Dr. Quinn, practically vibrating with scientific fervor, interjected, "The biochemical markers are undeniable. Human stress hormones mimic the juvenile recognition signals of numerous apex predator species across multiple death worlds. It's an evolutionary quirk, a bizarre cosmic coincidence." But Tess suspected it was more than just a coincidence. The way Spot had handed her the disruptor, the subtle shifts in its sensory pit luminescence, the almost intelligent way it interacted with her, it felt like a connection, not just a hormonal trigger. War, she had learned, often came down to understanding your enemy, but what if your greatest weapon wasn't a laser cannon, but a shared glance with a creature designed to kill? The captured corporate spies, interrogated under truth serums that would make Earth's polygraph look like a child's toy, revealed the Aurelian Corporation's sinister ambition to weaponize apex predators. Humanity's accidental discovery had inadvertently made them a key player in a galactic arms race they hadn't even known existed. The irony was a bitter pill. They had been accepted into the galactic community for their rudimentary space travel, and now their value lay in their ability to make friends with things that could eat starships. The following months were a whirlwind. Tess became the reluctant prototype for the Death Shadow Handler program. She was transferred to a new facility, a sprawling complex dedicated to the study and integration of apex predators from various death worlds. Each new encounter was a terrifying leap of faith, a test of Quinn's theories and Tessa's rapidly developing instincts. There were near misses, creatures that reacted with predictable hostility, and moments of profound, unsettling connection. She learned to read subtle shifts in alien body language, to project calm in the face of unimaginable terror. The memories of her training on Terminus 9, once a source of dread, now felt like a brutal but necessary apprenticeship. War, she realized, often forced you to adapt in ways you never thought possible, to find strength in the most unexpected of alliances. One particularly challenging encounter involved a pack of six-eyed, venomous sandstalkers from a desert planet. The initial attempts at bonding were messy. But Tess, drawing on her experiences with Spot and a surprising amount of patience, eventually found a common ground, a shared understanding based on mutual respect, and a healthy dose of fear on her part. The Sandstalkers, it turned out, responded well to rhythmic vocalizations and the occasional offering of nutrient paste. Apparently, even apex predators enjoyed a good snack. 6 months later, Tess stood at the edge of a newly established compatibility zone on a different death world, watching a group of nervous human recruits cautiously approach a cluster of juvenile razor wings, creatures with wings sharp enough to slice through armored vehicles. Beside her, Spot, now adorned with a small, slightly chewed GUF insignia, let out a soft rumble. "Remember," Tess called out to the recruits, her voice carrying across the alien planes, "they can sense your fear. Project confidence, but don't be aggressive. Think of them as very large, very angry space parrots with a penchant for dismemberment." Commander Ziegler, now sporting a permanent air of weary resignation, stood beside her. Handler Blackwood's methods are unorthodox, but undeniably effective. Thanks to her pioneering work, we now have viable bonds with apex predators on 7 different death worlds. Our tactical advantage is unprecedented. As a particularly large razor wing cautiously nuzzled a trembling recruit who had managed to project an aura of surprising calm, Tess couldn't help but chuckle. The Galactic Unified Forces, an organization that had mastered interstellar travel but struggled with coffee, had stumbled upon its most significant military breakthrough thanks to a human who smelled vaguely like baby monsters. The irony was almost comforting. Later that day, as Tess reviewed mission reports detailing the successful deployment of human predator teams, a message flashed across her datapad. It was from Earth. Her family had finally received news of her unique specialization. The message was short, a single line from her younger brother. "So, you're basically Space Mobley now? Mom wants to know if you're getting enough sleep." Tess leaned back in her chair, a weary smile spreading across her face. The vast gulf of space, the alien landscapes, the terrifying creatures, it all felt a little less daunting. Humanity might be a small, soft-skinned species in a galaxy of hardened warriors, but they had a knack for making unexpected friends. And sometimes, those friends had really, really sharp teeth. As Spot nudged her hand with its massive head, emitting that familiar garbage disposal-eating silverware purr, Tess couldn't help but think, well, at least I finally have an excuse for never bringing a date home to meet Mom. And that's the story of the bizarre bond between a human and the universe's deadliest predator. What do you think will happen next? Can humanity harness this power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story for more incredible tales of sci-fi, love, and war. See you in the next video.